Teachers of Reddit. Who is one standout student that you'll remember for a very long time? I'm married to a teacher. One kid decided to chef on news that his family had burned their restaurant to the ground on the weekend to claim the insurance money. Snitch. I worked in a remote community in Australia. We don't usually get highly motivated kids, as they have their own problems in life. They don't eat every day and usually only get a couple of hours of sleep a night. But this boy was incredibly happy to be at school, loved his art and was incredibly intelligent for his age in a range of subjects. To put this into perspective, most kids we deal with at the age of 13 have the same education level as 4-5-year-olds. Anyway, he and his family were driving on unsealed roads where the drunk father rolled the car going over 120 km/h. Not uncommon. Everyone else was okay, but he was sitting on his mum's lap without a seatbelt. He was thrown out of the car and rolled on. Was very sad because he was by far the smartest student we have ever had and one of the few who had aspirations other than being a drug dealer or doing nothing with their life. He wanted to be a doctor to help people like his grandma who was on constant dialysis. We had roughly 8 out of over 300 students pass year 12, so this is something we celebrated when he said this. He could have done it too. God dang it. I had a student with autism who was a carbon copy of Napoleon Dynamite. Great sense of dry humor that I really enjoyed. He's still around town and works at a convenience store. Whenever I go in there to buy beer, he'll casually walk by me, wag a finger and, in cartoon fashion, whisper moderation. LOL, that kid's great. I teach first. I have a student with high anxiety if I'm not there. I had a funeral for my grandpa, so I front loaded him with something like my grandpa went to heaven so I won't be here tomorrow. So and so will be the sub. He said okay, walked away, then came back a few minutes later and hugged me and said I'm sorry about your grandpa. You don't see much empathy from 6-year-olds. I don't think I'll ever forget that moment. My first year working in education. There was one kid that was super creative. He could turn anything into a game. He made a game with dominoes one time that I couldn't for the life of me beat, and I was seriously trying. He later confided in me that his ex-stepfather had hit his mom and been to jail several times. It broke my heart because he and his siblings were the sweetest kids. He said to me once, "I think we're all teachers," and that quote still rings true, 7 years later. That's a great line. Not necessarily a standout for positive reasons, but I once had a student arrested in the middle of class for robbing 3 separate banks across state lines. I'll certainly never forget that. Robbing 3 separate banks across state lines. We got lawmen in 3 different states after us. High school teacher here. This is a long story, but it's a frozen hellscape outside and I've got nothing to do since school was cancelled today and tomorrow. Had a kid placed in my class in the middle of the year. The student had moved from Georgia to Ohio. The first name was not gender specific and I thought for 2 weeks that the student was male, and I was wrong. She did nothing every day but come in and sleep or otherwise appear comatose, and dressed and looked like she didn't care about anything. The girl obviously had some real problems, likely including heavy drug use. We have a small but serious boxing community in our school. It produced the captain of the 2004 Olympic boxing team, and somehow this girl got involved. Among the first time I heard her string more than 1 or 2 sentences together was when she was talking with another student about how difficult the training was and that you'd get your butt beat in the ring or left behind on a training run if you stayed up late or got high. I taught summer school that year and this girl took a full load of classes to try to catch up. By this time she was outgoing, involved, and smiling. She took time to attend to her appearance too, but the biggest change was that her eyes were wide open in a way I had never seen before. The next year she had a date for homecoming, got on the honor roll, and graduated on time. She kept with the boxing and loved it. I still don't know why she left Georgia or what her problems were. My best guess is being the victim of some sort of abuse. But when she found her thing she made the biggest turnaround I've ever seen. Always nice to see a positive change. I had an international female student who started a family in an English-speaking country with a male from her home country. She was becoming Americanized, to her husband's dismay, so he kidnapped the baby back to his home country. For complicated reasons, The woman could not simply go back to her home country without disastrous consequences. The whole saga was absolutely heartbreaking. I have no idea how it turned out. That's depressing as heck. I hope things ended up working out for her. The kid that brought dry ice to school, wrote "frick you" on the wall with his own crap, put kids' soap sculptures into the microwave in the teacher's lounge, downloaded pee on a school computer, humped a dodgeball multiple times, laid under his desk and humped the ground, called from the classroom phone to order pizza, and that was a great year. That kid's going places. Not the kind of places you might want to visit though. Not while I was a teacher, but while I was an aide there was a girl in the class who didn't talk. Everyone just assumed she was mute and would make fun of her for not talking. Even the teacher kinda brushed her off as, "Oh, so and so just doesn't speak, so don't worry about it." I don't know what that little kid went through or why she wouldn't talk to her classmates, but she could definitely talk and hated everyone in that class for being mean to her. I think about her all the time and often wonder how she's doing since she'd be entering high school pretty soon. We had a girl like that in school and I talked to her all the time. I was always talking and her being mute didn't faze me. Ran into her a couple of years ago and she hugged me and told me she had a hard life and that I was the only one who made it better. She is doing well in life, so that made me happy. I teach 8th grade. Last year, we lost one of our students in an accident right before fall break. From day one, he had been my favorite student. He was unbelievably kind and intelligent. Literally every single student had only positive things to say about him. I know that's typically how it goes when someone passes, but it wasn't like that with him. He was just one of those people you couldn't help but love. He was someone who would go out of his way to help those around him, and he brought out the best in his peers. A born leader. Then we lost him. I floundered for the rest of the year. I never felt like I completely regained my footing. I'm thankful for the time I had with him in my class, but I'm terrified of having to go through that again. I had this one student last semester that I do not think I'll ever forget. The very first day of class he came in, looked me dead in the eye, smashed an apple on his forehead and then ate the thing in about 5 bites, core and all. I asked him why he did it and he just replied, asserting my dominance. The next week he came in looking very suspicious with his hands in his pockets. I ask him what he's going to do today and before I can even prevent the situation he slams an egg down on the desk and slurps up the yolk. Even the other kids found this more weird than funny. A couple weeks later I'm up in front teaching and I notice he's being extra quiet since he's typically quite disruptive. I stare down in his corner and when he notices me looking he shows me half a pen in his hand and smiles while his mouth is covered in ink, like almost dripping out of his mouth. He comes up to the garbage can to spit some out and I ask him where the other part of the pen is and he tells me he ate it, plastic and all. We never did find the rest and I kinda believe he actually did eat it. Lastly, the one that really sticks out is the day he came into the class, didn't say a word and just sat down. I immediately think he's high or something and kinda just watch from afar as this kid is zoning in and out staring at the wall. I ask a kid if they know what's up with this kid today cause it's weird he's not yelling random nonsense to me about his day. This other kid just laughs and asks me if I want to see a video, so I say I do because I'm interested now. This video shows my apple core egg slurping pen eating demon child chugging 4 bottles of NyQuil. We got the kid some medical attention after that. The weirdest part of all of this was I was in touch with his grandmother quite frequently and she was never surprised by anything he did. When I told her about the egg, I kid you not, her reply was along the lines of, "Ugh. Again. I can never keep eggs in the house when he's around." I had a girl a few years ago who came into my geometry class absolutely hating math. Like, she spoke about math with such venom in her voice that you'd think a mathematician murdered her parents or something. She didn't have any behavior issues, but her attitude toward me initially was that I was one in a long line of people appointed to torture her. After a few lessons, though, her tone became decidedly softer. She still complained about how much math sucked every chance she got, but her complaints were about the subject itself, never about me. After a semester of work, she was turning in A caliber work and acing tests left and right. She continued to complain about math, but as the year progressed, it became more of a running joke than a true hatred. She came to my class for Algebra 2 and again, she aced the class. A lot of less math sucks comments, and I knew her personality well enough by that point that her math sucks rants featured a heavy dose of sarcasm. I figured that I'd never see her again after that because she technically didn't need another year of math to graduate, but lo, behold, she came back to my class for pre-calculus. The girl who came to me absolutely abhorring math got a 100% on literally everything in the class in the first semester and missed a 100% on the second semester by only a bit because she got a 98% on her final. I'm guessing due to senioritis. The funny part is that I had an aspiring teacher sit in for an observation one day while she was in my pre-calculus class, and he noted her behavior and thought that she was a problem child. He was really surprised to hear that she was actually one of my best students and one of my favorites, precisely because of the turnaround in attitude that I saw in her. Sounds like you are one of the reasons she is doing so well in math now. Awesome teacher. I had one super sassy student who would always grimace when asked a question and give minimal effort in anything related to class. One day our school had a Halloween party and I was helping with a magic show when she ran up to me with her friend and said, "This is my favorite teacher," to her friend. She was smiling so much and so happy, and from that day on she was a brilliant kid showing her true potential. Always high five everyone in your class and make and blossom fellow teachers. That always blows me away, when you have a kid that you don't butt heads with, or like become super close with, and then on the last day of school, they blurt out, "You're my favorite teacher." You never really know the impact you have on others. I'm the student here, but I recently saw a teacher of mine from high school and she still has an extra credit answer I drew for the last final I took for her. It was one of those joke extra credit questions where she asked something about Carthage and Rome, and I basically wrote an essay, complete with maps. She gave me double extra credit points, but I still failed the test and her class. But I was still one of her favorite students, and she kept it. We read Romeo and Juliet my freshman year and took a test afterwards. One of the questions was something draw conclusion, and this kid drew a freaking picture. Teacher came about as close to calling him a retard as you can without losing your job. Taught high school theater and discovered a notebook that was being passed around mentioning a lot of high school drinking. So, one night instead of rehearsal, we staged an intervention with the cast of the show. We kept things very vague. Let the kids know we cared about them and talked to them frankly about some of our own experiences with addiction and depression. At the end of it, one student, someone who was not even mentioned in the notebook and I would have never suspected any of the things we talked about applied to him, pulled me aside and said, "I don't know how you guys figured it out, but yeah, I've been cutting, and I really appreciate you not calling me out in there." He got help soon thereafter, and is living a healthy life to this day. Thank you, teacher. I'm an ex-teacher and I'll always remember one of my favorite students. She was the type who was very bright but often got labeled as a troublemaker. I personally like to think of her as chaotic neutral. Since I was a pretty honest teacher and told her outright I knew she was smart but lazy, she liked me and really excelled in English. My favorite memory of her and the reason I remember her most is when she ordered a pizza to the school premises. Our school had a healthy eating policy and was quite strict about what could be purchased in school. On this occasion, she decided she fancied a takeaway pizza for lunch, so called up a branch of a well-known pizza delivery and had one brought to school. One of the deputy head teachers caught her walking around the school corridors with the pizza in a box and confiscated it from her and threw an almost whole pizza in the bin. He told her that she was violating the school's policy on healthy food, and even worse, she had caused a safeguarding concern by either leaving the school grounds without permission from school and a parent, which was not allowed, or even worse, inviting a non-sanctioned adult, the delivery guy, onto school premises. The punishment for this was a week in our isolation center. She vehemently argued that she had not broken the policy as other students brought lunches from home and the staff did not remove their lunch if it was deemed unhealthy, and she had neither left school premises or invited the delivery guy into the premises. Obviously the deputy didn't believe her. To cut a long story short, she fought against her punishment by requesting a meeting with the school and her parents. She formally requested copies of the school's CCTV footage and represented herself at the meeting. In the end, The CCTV footage showed her stopping the delivery guy on one side of the school gate while she stood on the other. You could clearly see her instructing the delivery guy to place the box on the floor under the gate and step away. She then placed her money on the box and stepped away on her side of the gate. He took the money, then she took the box and no safeguarding incident occurred. The school wasn't happy but begrudgingly waived her punishment, and to make it even better, they had to reimburse her for the pizza. Not a teacher, but my mom was for almost 40 years. She taught resource classes for K3 in a suburban low-income school, and ever since I could say my ABCs and count to 50, I've been used as an impromptu teacher's aide for her understaffed classroom whenever my school district's schedule and hers didn't have the same days off. She taught in the next city over from where we lived. There have been a number of kids who went through her classroom that have made a lasting impression on both her and me, from children on the spectrum, to a little girl with 2 TTEs, to a little boy in the middle of a personality split, and the kindergartner who vividly described in great detail for the first 3 days of the school year how he was going to torture and murder my mother and the entire class. While all of these children are memorable, I don't remember their faces, and only remember a handful of their names, except one. I'll call her Sarah, not her real name. Sarah was unusual. She was extremely bright, but couldn't seem to focus that into a measurable way for school. She was also horribly mentally scarred from traumas I hate to even begin to imagine. When I first met her, she was hiding under a table and wouldn't come out, which was her typical behavior. She wouldn't talk to adults. Her face was always smudged with grime, and she wore a white rabbit fur coat that she refused to take off for any reason. I was in high school at the time, and on one of my visits, I crawled under the table and started talking to her, and lured her out and into a chair, which my mom found to be a miracle that she actually came out. She whispered to me the first words anyone in that school had ever heard her say, and to this day I don't know why she decided to trust me, of all people. Over the coming year I tried to drop by mom's class as often as I could, and I watched her blossom into a bubbly girl who loved to read, and I encouraged her and the rest of the class to practice writing by creating a classroom elf named Knopf for them to write to. She clung to me, and I encouraged her to find her wings and grow. The next year she was transferred to another school after her living situation changed yet again, and I have no idea what happened to her. I bet she's going to remember you for a long time. You did good. I'm my second year teaching. I was lucky enough to teach a student who was very bright. He accelerated in all his classes and I was always creating additional tasks for him to work on. For egg, when studying the film WALL-E, the students had to do a PowerPoint on a character of their choosing. He finished it in 2 classes. The additional work he did was to research and identify 10 inaccuracies in the film. It took him 3 classes. Anyway, I didn't get to teach him the following year and he had a teacher that refused to give him any additional work. So the student decided he was going to use all of his extra time to write a novel. I worked alongside him with the blessing of his mother OBV. He finished it within a year and a half. I edited it and we made some rewrites. Unfortunately, he finished it at a time when the book world was flooded with fantasy books and we were unable to secure an agent due to his age. The only option was the Vanity publish it, but none of us have the money. He has continued to write sequels and has compiled them somewhere safe. I don't teach at that school anymore and have fallen out of touch, but I doubt I will teach another student like that. I really hope you meet up again one day with that student. Sounds like the type that would give full credit where's it due, but more importantly it sounded like you both enjoyed the process. I teach where there was a school shooting. My student was shot and almost died. She survived because a specialist happened to be in town. When I visited with her in the hospital a couple days after, she asked how she could finish the class. Her drive was impressive. This says more about the education system than the student. I'm in college in Europe right now and a friend of mine got the flu during exams so he could only do 1. The school decided he could only read 2 exams and therefore failed 3 others. I had a kinda student last year with some interesting mental health issues. He constantly lashed out physically at staff and students, but one day it was worse than others. My family always looked forward last year to me coming home to hear news. Stories. On this particular day my class was lining up beside another class to come in from outdoor play while C was muttering to himself about sharks and zombies, his two favorite things. Out of nowhere he bites another girl in the class on the lip, drawing blood, and doesn't understand why she's so distraught. He starts yelling at her that tiger sharks are the strongest, and she should listen to him when he is warning her about them. One of his exact quotes was, "Next time don't doubt tiger sharks." The main issue was that this little girl wasn't even talking to him or standing near him. He imagined this whole conversation in his head. Every day was an adventure with the student, and he made so much growth while in our program. I enjoy seeing his happy face in the hallways at school now when I walk past him, especially because he isn't in my class anymore, haha. A student once asked me what his sister was like when she was in high school. We had been in the same year throughout high school and then went to the same college for a bit, so I knew her pretty well, even though we weren't exactly friends. Great girl. Everyone loved her. She had this way of making you smile no matter how sad you felt. So I'm like, well, what is she up to these days? She must have recognized my name if you know we went to school together. Well, turns out she committed suicide a few months after our last semester together. Her brother was 9 at the time and was now in my class 7 years later. He recognized me from her yearbook pictures and just wanted to learn more about his sister from someone who got to see a different side of her. That's so heartbreaking. My little brother, now 10, is a major reason I don't have suicide attempts anymore. I already lost so much of him when I was hospitalized for 1.5 plus years, and I'm his second favorite person. First being his dad, but he died. I can't imagine him losing me as well. That student of yours is so strong. Hope he's doing okay. It was my first year teaching. 6th grade self-contained sped. This school was rough. Those kids challenged me every day. There were 25 students in this class. They gave me a really hard time, but I know a lot of them had issues at home on top of learning and behavior problems. I cried driving home every day for them and for me. My first unannounced observation came along. My class sat up straight in their seats and did not make a peep. Was this my class? One student, who gave me a particular hard time and was well known to admin, I noticed, was sweating, like beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Instead of calling out like usual, he raised his hand and answered a question in the most polite voice, as we all secretly couldn't believe this. When he principal left, and the entire class flopped down with relief. That was so hard, my sweating student said. I know he tried, with every bone in his body, to behave for this, to the point where he was sweating. My dear students, who drove me to the brink of crazy that year, told me they loved me and wanted to make sure I had a good observation. They had 2 teachers prior that year who quit, and they wanted to make sure I did not leave. Thanks. Now I'm crying at work. Glad you stuck with them. One boy from when I was a student intern in a kindergarten classroom stands out above all others. He had been violent previously and had been sent to a mental facility and was being phased back into the public school system on the 2nd week that I was in the classroom, so not only was I new to teaching, still getting to know the students and the school workings, but now I had a 5-year-old with a history of violence that must have been bad enough to have been removed from the school already once before. His first day back, he arrived before I got to the classroom. When I entered the room, he had already destroyed all of the desks, 25 of them, had thrown them all around the room and piled them atop one another. As I entered, he was taking the class pet bird out of the cage and ripped the head off right in front of me. Some other students saw him and started yelling and crying, and the regular classroom teacher came running in and grabbed him, and he was trying to run toward the other kids with the bloody bird pieces. I was trying to get the principal and counselor to the classroom. It was horrible. He was removed again, and in the remaining 8 weeks I was there, I never saw him again, and never did find out what happened to him. Holy carp, that's scary. IDK what the right treatment for him is, but he really shouldn't be around other kids in a classroom setting. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.